our Fireside Chat series. Today, we're proud to have Perry Babb, CEO of Key State Energy, here to discuss Appalachia's next energy revolution, the direct use of natural gas in manufacturing with capture and permanent geological storage of CO2. Before we start, I'd like to take a moment to recognize our hosting program. I'm Michelle Littlefield, Program Coordinator with the United States Energy Association. We're a nonprofit, non-lobbying organization, and we've done work in over 100 countries with USAID, the State Department, and the Department of Energy, Fossil Energy, and Carbon Management, who funds our specific program. We call this the Consensus Program. This is a cooperative agreement with the Department of Energy. Our mission is to educate the public, policymakers, industry, and stakeholders on CCUS and carbon management technologies. We do this by hosting public webinars like our Fireside Chat series, monthly educational briefings, conference workshops, technical reports, and news clips of CCUS and carbon management related updates. This could include rare earth elements, critical minerals, blue hydrogen, environmental justice as it relates to carbon management, and tribal energy articles to our interested audience. If you'd like to join, feel free to send an email to the address at the bottom of your screen. So we'll save Q&A for the very end of our section here. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to use the Q&A button. And with that, I'll pass it over and introduce our program director, Mr. Mike Moore.
Michelle, thank you very much for the introduction, and looking forward to today. Perry, I appreciate you being able to take the time to be with us this afternoon. I had the honor of meeting Perry not long ago at a carbon capture and storage program up in Pittsburgh, and we got off to the side and compared notes for a while and realized that there was a lot of parallel interests and activities, and certainly from a development side, a business developer, an opportunity developer, and somebody with a big eye towards not just the commercial aspects, but also the humanitarian components of this as well in this new world we find ourselves in. Perry is 42 years of organizational development and having founded multiple successful companies in business services, construction, energy marketing, and 3 nonprofit corporations with strategic humanitarian work in a dozen countries. He's got more that I could read to you, but we'll suss that out as we continue to talk. But I also, something else that's interesting that I think is I find very admirable. You've been published in 7 different languages, which I think I've been published once or twice just in English. That was a very large feat for me to do that. So seven languages being published is hats off to you on that one. I'm actually going to do this is I'm going to turn this over to Perry. His company, Key State Energy, just recently was announced just recently. His projects and his company are part of a larger event called ARCH2 that was the recent recipient of one of the DOE blessings to be funded for the Hydrogen Hubs program. No small feat to have been part of a development idea in its own right, no small feat to have a commercial entity in place to be able to participate. And again, no small feat that you pass the first series of acid tests with the Department of Energy to be part of a program that they've chosen as one they want to go forward with. I believe in the beginning there were over 80 early applicants for this concept that the DOE had to work through over time, took it down to about 30 plus, and then final decision was recently made. And I'm going to use that as the lead in. And the other part that I want to highlight before we get going is that you're in an area that's right smack dab in this energy transition initiative that's underway. There's all kinds of things that are in play. There's the human aspect with peoples and their regional affiliations to resource development that's moving into a different era. There's people's skill sets that need to get reset and rejiggered to some degree. There's the funding aspects of this. There's the environmental component to this. There's land use. There's, friends with neighbors kind of things to deal with. There's government and local federal components of that to contend with as well. And Perry's one of those navigators that has been able to move through these these areas and to be viable and engaged and part of this next phase of activity. So with that, I'm going to let Perry tell us about Key State Energy, about himself, and even how did you get to here with your other experiences?
Thank you, Mike. I did enjoy meeting you and talking to you a few times since then, and appreciate the friendship. Appreciate USEA's work. Have been a listener on many of these in the past several years, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. Most of America's history, innovation is born out of desperation, really more than discipline or luck and other things. It's when you don't have a choice, you've got to figure out a way to do something. You figure it out, and that's the case in our situation at Key State in our initial project in north central Pennsylvania. My partners, Frontier Natural Resources, secured a 7,000-acre stranded gas asset, very remote. When they acquired it, it had been developed previously, but no pipeline connection, thus it's stranded. And to monetize the gas, there wasn't a value proposition to build the long pipeline, et cetera. So they approached me about how we could find ways to monetize the gas. And initially, we thought we would compress or liquefy and move it away, and subsequently a 35,000 gallon a day LNG plant was built. But about 6 years ago, almost now, we realized that we had to make something with the gas in order to get value out of it. 250 BCF of Marcellus, and how could we monetize it in such a low cost, Leidy Hub region of Pennsylvania? Always discounted to Henry Hub price. How could we monetize the gas? And so that took us on a journey where we understood we had a gas asset, and understood that we were probably strategic to a lot of Northeast Mid-Atlantic markets, 200 miles to New York, to DC, to Buffalo, Philly, Pittsburgh. And if we could find products that we'd have an advantage on gas price and an advantage on location and proximity to market, well, we kind of stumbled into about 3.5 years ago, that we also had a geological storage asset. And this actually came out of meetings with fossil energy and carbon management. My attorneys had set up a meeting during the discussions about qualified opportunity zones. And they were seeking ways to help manufacturing in those zones, and our 7,000 acres in one of those zones. And in that meeting, I said, we were going to make fertilizer. And they said, well, have you ever thought about carbon storage? And I said, no, sir. And Sean Bennett, a friend of yours, Mike, was in that conversation. And Sean said, well, have you ever thought about hydrogen production? We said, no, but we'll find out about it. And so eventually that led us to appreciate we had a geological storage asset, and that if we integrated those pieces, fast forward 3.5 years, that we could create a value proposition where we produce the gas at cost of production, basically, to the plant, have control of every molecule that is used as feedstock. We would be able to get to a very, very low CI number, really historic low CI number, because the value proposition to do that was there because we were making a high value product with that natural gas. And then eventually that SMR wouldn't allow us to get what we needed to. We thought in carbon intensity, we had reached the volume that ATR made sense, autothermal reforming made sense. And so when we took the step of integrating gas production, ATR, to make hydrogen and related products, and then the last nut to crack was the last of the power from the grid. We had already moved most of what methane would be combusted for steam and heat to combustion hydrogen. And the last bit was about 12 megawatts of power. And so we're doing that with 100% gas turbine. So it gives us a CI number that is mind-boggling for hydrogen made from methane. And that's really, innovation is going to win. That's how we do it. And innovation is going to win. And the big news is, yes, Appalachia will be a hydrogen superpower in the next 30 or 40 years, because we're going to maximize the gas asset. We're going to maximize the workforce. We're going to maximize the proximity to major markets. And then most recently, we're going to maximize the geological storage. And it's going to allow us to produce very, very low carbon hydrogen at massive scales. If we were just trying to displace diesel fuel in the US with hydrogen, that would take well over 1,500 plants the size of ours to do that. 1.5 billion times 1,500, that's a lot of plants and a lot of money and a very long transition if we're just talking about displacing diesel fuel. So Appalachia's role with those 4 factors looks terrific for the future. And now the latest then, being able to manage the CI number on the upstream around the value proposition of that hydrogen, that the value proposition just wasn't there before. So what would typically be vented, we capture and use. What would typically, there would be CO2 emissions related to equipment, we don't use that equipment. And so it gives us an upstream CI number, a very low carbon and high percentage of CO2 capture and ATR, and no power from the grid. And so it's on par easily and has a lower CI score than the most stringent requirement in the IRA, for example, the hydrogen production tax credit. That is exciting. That's an earthquake, that we can produce hydrogen at massive scales using natural gas, and it meets the most stringent requirement for qualified clean hydrogen according to IRA. That is huge. That is huge.
That lower CI number also takes you down a path of a higher incentive out of the IRA bill, I believe.
Yeah, so the value proposition around that very valuable hydrogen, it warrants the extra expense that it takes to produce natural gas with incredibly low CI number. And we have the perfect, it's kind of a laboratory at scale, and there's 12 BCF of gas a year we'll use. It's no small amount of gas, but because we're producing it all in a very closed system, it's all coming from our own wells, our own gas, and that's going to be the future, where where the gas came from, where the molecule came from. If the goal is to make qualified clean hydrogen, you're going to know where every molecule came from. You're going to be able to monitor it every which way from Sunday, way up in the air, right on the ground, at every valve. And you're going to have to do that to educate and demonstrate that you're producing great carbon, great quality and low carbon hydrogen at huge scales that are needed. Scale is the issue, yeah.
When your area in Pennsylvania, would you describe that kind of like your kind of central east, central?
Yeah, almost exactly dead center. So the county right next to us, the county line 10 miles away is called Center County of Pennsylvania.
Right, okay, yeah.
So it's above Interstate 80, dead center of the state. And then, that's very strategic to the Northeast Mid-Atlantic. And then our second project is in Southwest Virginia, and likewise, very strategic to markets in the Mid-Atlantic Southeast. And both are classic Appalachia regions. Great workforce, great natural resources. Now we understand natural gas asset, carbon storage asset. Both our sites are former coal mine sites. I mean, it literally is the energy transition. And for the PA project, we'll make a portfolio project, hydrogen being one for mobility, hydrogen fuel cell trucks. And at the other end of the plant, we're using that hydrogen to make ammonia, to make urea, to make diesel exhaust treatment, which lowers the emissions of diesel trucks. So one end of the plant, we're displacing diesel fuel. The other end of the plant, we're producing products that lower the emissions of diesel that's still on the road, and will be on the road for decades to come. I mean, it's a perfect demonstration of this is energy transition.
Yes. And to make the urea, you're using CO2 in the production process?
Yeah, so we'll capture and store about 500,000 tons of CO2 related to the qualified clean hydrogen and clean ammonia. And then the other train related to urea for ag purposes and urea for DEF, we'll use about 170,000 tons of CO2 for that.
There's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the DOE, maybe the USDA as well, have programs for the CO2 conversion or the utilization of CO2 for other products that don't get back into the atmosphere. Does this qualify in that area, or is this
No, it's up on a parallel track. There's not programs that qualify it, but if you think in terms of like, most of our urea will go for granulated urea or urea ammonium nitrate,
Mhm.
and that amount of carbon that you use to make that product, and you put it in the field next to the corn kernel, and it grows this stalk, and that stalk is carbon. Right. So you've captured all this carbon from the atmosphere. So there's been some studies done on what's the net effect of that. But I think the consensus is if urea is a very good product to use because of food security, and we couldn't keep the world's population, half of it, alive if we weren't using synthetic nitrogen, from ammonia urea, and the fact of what it does in pulling carbon out of the atmosphere. And again, that stalk of corn is used somehow, that CO2 is eventually emitted. But if there's a good way that's justifiable to emit CO2, it has to be related to food production.
Right. All right. Well, there's a number of other efforts underway for working with biomass to retire biomass in a way that the CO carbon is locked up and retired. It doesn't get back into a fuel stream or other processes as well. So my guess is that maybe not today, but in the near future, you may see some other processes that you can tag into with your urea on that one. The area that you're in, both Virginia and Pennsylvania, you made the comment that this was coal mining area. Are there legacy coal mines or operational coal mines still in the immediate or inside your operating area, both in Virginia and in Pennsylvania?
There's in both. So there's on the 7,000 acres, there's legacy coal mine there, nothing that's been mined right on that site in many numbers of years.
Sure.
But within 10 miles, there's an active coal mine. And then at the Virginia site, it's part of a 65,000 acre tract, and the energy park that's been formed for our manufacturing facility and other energy and data centers, et cetera, related facilities will be at. There's active coal mine, not on the 65,000 acres, but nearby. I don't recall how far away. But in Southwest Virginia, my understanding is that over the last 10 or 15 years has lost about 10,000 coal jobs.
Yeah.
And you're just talking the whole of the tax base gets flipped upside down, extended families get flipped upside down. So you got that terrific workforce and skill set that most of it translates right in to making hydrogen from methane and storing the CO2 and related products. So you can imagine in north central Pennsylvania, that's Clinton County, where the project is Clinton Center and Cameron, Clearfield, that are right there together in the corner of those 4 counties. From a job standpoint, tax base standpoint, there's a lot of enthusiasm. And so far, when people have a chance to hear out the story behind what you're doing and what the emissions profile actually is.
Right.
This is not, my wife's granddad helped build Allied Chemicals ammonia plant in the 30s in Hope, Virginia.
Right.
That's like a crazy science project. You could smell it all over, 20 miles away, and all this stuff was happening. This is like a hospital laboratory. I mean, these kind of facilities now, as you know.
Right.
And the story around emissions, related to how it's produced, what kind of profile that product has when it's used. It's a great story, and most people are enthusiastic when they get a chance to ask probing questions and get those answers.
Sure. Well, if you think you've had active resource development in these areas for, Pennsylvania and Virginia, probably 200 years, I would guess, going back to early coal, iron ore, all the other areas that had been tapped into. And so you've got a workforce that's evolved over time around resource development and monetization to one day come in and have all that shut down without a follow-on like what you're doing. There's a lot of peoples whose family histories or legacies had been around resources are now in a whole new conundrum, I would say, about what does your future look like. I work with a handful of tribes in the central western states that have energy resources that are going through the same kind of transition, and in a couple of cases where the coal consumption and coal fired utility assets have been closed down, that there's a huge pool of highly skilled people who find themselves with very, very few, if not any, alternative employment opportunities. Even to retrain and reskill set, you have to have industries in location to need the employees. And so it was kind of, I don't know which way to take in this when I heard the story, but one of the companies thinking well for these folks offered to retrain a bunch of them as plumbers. And they appreciated that offer, but they said, look around, we're in a very arid, low dense populated area. There's not a lot of plumbing activity that the other 299 plumbers could work on. And so sometimes, some of those things get mixed. It sounds like what you're doing is a perfect fit for what's been there before. People get to stay, as I'd say, being in the energy resource play, kind of speak, is something that they've grown up around, they're familiar with, and there's more of this going forward, and probably got more of a say in how things go forward nowadays than they may have had in past years as well. Another thing I think about out loud when you're telling me about your projects and where they're located, there's also a lot of local, state, even federal familiarity of large-scale resource development and handling. There are some parts of the United States where some of these new activities that surface, there's no pre-existing state or local experience in managing resource development of size or scale that you might be doing here matters. As I'm sure you can testify, that any kind of an event that slows down projects go forward motion becomes a cost factor. And so retraining states or bringing states up from scratch on regulatory issues and local resource management issues that aren't familiar with any of this, is probably pretty challenging. You have a lot of that going for you.
Yeah, and another factor to that is usually these areas are very remote and sparsely populated.
Right.
And so you don't have nearly the concern of expanding an existing ammonia facility that's been there for 80 years, and there's neighborhoods a mile away or closer, and legitimate concerns. In West Keating Township in Clinton County, I think the number is 17 registered voters in the township. Okay, so there's a lot more elk than people, and so when you're reclaiming a coal mine area and there's not concerned population that's nearby that they have a reason to be afraid or et cetera, or wonder about emissions close by, and their bigger concern are things like, will you improve the roads and will there be jobs for my grandkids?
Sure.
That's the big concern. Yeah, and one thing related to that that you said a second ago, when we started to make and defining the vision of what we were trying to do to incorporate carbon capture and storage, we talked to investment banking, and nobody understood what we were talking about, rarely. And we stumbled upon Oil and Gas Climate Initiative and their Climate Investment Fund, OGCI, which is a consortium of the super majors and a bunch of major oil and gas companies, European companies. And they had a mandate to support early carbon storage and the fugitive methane, upstream methane emission reduction. And so so we're a portfolio company. The Key State Natural Gas Synthesis, the PA plant's a portfolio company of CI. And that was they were some of the few in the country that were putting early money in. Think about it, 3 years ago. And so that was a godsend. So it goes back to the innovation is the only way to get out of these kind of things.
Sure.
In our situation with the 7,000 acres and Frontier and myself, we had to innovate to find a way to monetize this and anybody's dream to be realized, and much less the dreams of others around that were looking for jobs for their family in the future, things like that.
Sure.
Um,
Well, I would imagine at this point in developed as you are into this, that your counties and even at a state level, you've got friendly partners that are working with you to help see these things be developed and get off on the right foot. The money part, it's interesting. You bring that up about running to OGCI. Their members would know what you were going to work with and what you were going to be dealing with and face with, but also the benefits that you could bring out in a successful venture that they could be a part of. That was great that you could find that relationship early on.
And you know, and maybe this is a good time to talk a little bit about ARCH2 and the
Sure.
significance, because what's happening is, and I've been a participant in the hydrogen hub hysteria,
Yep.
and kind of the hydrogen mania, and that bubble is popping right now, and you can, and it's related to some of the pullback on timing of electric vehicles being manufactured, and it's not the process is derailed, but some reality is coming to. This is a transition, and transitions take time. There's a lot of things being figured out, and cheaper, better still wins. If you can't make it cheaper and better than a product that's available on the market, it's not going to make a business that's sustainable. It can't be government supported enough to do that. That the government can mandate it, but it can't be incentivized enough unless you can make it cheaper, better. And that's the innovation that's being spurred right now. And we had to find a way to become competitive with diesel fuel, for example. Because cheaper, better is going to win. So the excitement around, the exuberance around hydrogen hubs, anytime you're talking about $1 billion coming to a region, plenty of reasons to get excited. But very competitive process, like you said, unbelievably competitive, just to get selected to be a part of a hub. It was dozens and dozens of projects in Appalachia. And then for that hub application to be accepted, and so I couldn't be more excited about what that means. So the validation, the attention that it's brought, et cetera, we're enjoying the fruit of that now. So along with that and the air that's coming out of the balloon is that hydrogen hub funding doesn't solve all the problems. If you have a sorry business case, it doesn't solve your problem. Okay?
Right.
Because the amount of funding that you're going to receive as a hub applicant is diluted across the other projects in your hub. And it could be, in our case, there's 5 or 6 major ones that are at least $1.5 billion to $3 or $4 billion each.
Right.
Plus a dozen more that are a little more modest. So the percentage of funding that you'll realize from ARCH2 or some of the other hubs, I'm sure it's the same. It's not going to get the project finance. Okay, now the government's going to pay for it. It's a small percentage, but what it does do, it brings validation of the concept, validation, there's market players going on, but that's part of the air coming out of the hydrogen balloon right now.
Right.
And it's kind of some reality check. Okay, wait a minute, how are we going to finance this? We still have to have a good business case. It's not going to be funded by the Hub Initiative, and that's DOE's, ambition, and that there's real businesses that are created for this.
Right.
And then, secondly, the tire has begun to hit the road about, wait a minute, who's the buyers for this hydrogen that's so expensive?
Yeah.
And if the customer can use natural gas that costs them maybe $5 an MMBTU to be delivered to their plant, and you're telling me you're going to provide me hydrogen that's at least $15 an MMBTU to be delivered there, how can the business work on that? So innovation is what's beating that down now, so that hydrogen can be competitive. Is it better? Yes, it's better. Is it cheaper? It's got to be made cheaper before it's going to be widely used. And that's some of the reasons that our off-takers have asked us to replicate the Key State approach with the Virginia project, and that's other sites we're looking at, is because the business case part we had to beat. We couldn't be a science project. We had no big balance sheet.
Right.
Had to find a way to innovate it to be able to compete with our products against higher emissions products.
You have your background in other businesses. One of my, as I remember, is that we were talking, you've got a pretty good hand in the logistics operations of moving things locally and internationally. And logistics are usually one of the danger points in any kind of a business enterprise, because you can have a great idea for a process that makes a lot of sense, but if finished product or feedstock or parts and what have you have a lot of issues getting to or out of where you're located, i.e. your logistics, it's not going to work very well. You can be eaten alive just on the logistics. And my guess is that part of your equation is probably a big help from your past experiences as well.
Well, the corner of what you described is actually the cornerstone. I think that's gotten us this far is because I did about 20 years of international aid work.
Right.
So trying to figure out how to get something across the border.
Yep.
This was mostly in Eastern Europe after the former Soviet Union, communism collapsed there.
Yep.
And so you can get across the border, but what does it do they need? Do they need food? Well, that's not going to last very long if you just can feed them. Can you create some companies that they can employ each other? And well, wait a minute, do you have a feedstock for that company? Is there consistent power that they can rely on? Can they get a permit to do that? Do you have to bribe for everything to move and do anything else? So what that taught me is that you have to think holistically. And so you match that with some entrepreneurial unctions and a lot of desperation, then you look at everything. Okay. You're not married to anything because you're looking liberally. You want to look at every option. So perfect. I mean, I'm a sociologist by training, and perfect resume and education to develop a project in energy transition, because I don't think like regular energy people.
Right.
And I had to find something that worked, not that fit within my understanding or my silo. And so that experience in aid work, super valuable preparation, because it forced me, if you're going to figure out what the strategic problem is, and can you solve that strategic problem, and then how in controlling for all the variables can you do that? So it's the feedstock, all those bits and pieces, can you get it there, etc. Super helpful. And when I got into energy and development of projects eventually.
After we'd spoken that time up in Pittsburgh and then a couple of times by phone, that was one of the pieces that popped out. Yeah, I get to meet a lot of folks, as you do as well. I've been around the energy sector for a while. and you see things come and go, and there's people that kind of stick in the back of your mind of they've connected a few dots and they've got this figured out. I brokered foreign crude oil for quite a while, and there's plain vanilla transactions that have a tight margin, and then there's unique transactions. Each one's different, how it's sourced, its quality, how you get it from point A to point B. And it was all about logistics, and the guys that could figure that piece out could capture the margin. Won't believe that piece of it. So you've got these two project areas. You mentioned you're also looking at other areas. Is there particular other parts of the country, without tipping your hand too much, that are also on the table?
So looking for the combination of the right geology, right gas supply. So at this point in the market's maturity, you go to where you can get the best gas supply that has a minimal geology, and you're in proximity to some market that makes sense, or set of products that you could provide. Mm-hmm. And so we've looked almost coast to coast at sites and opportunities. But really what's happened in the last 6 weeks is that people with sites have come to us. And so it's speeding up the process a bit, and it's allowing us to kind of pick through at this stage of the game, what would be the ones. And we're getting ready to announce in a few weeks a co-development partner across all our projects. So that'll just accelerate everything.
Great.
It'll majorly expand our capabilities and so that we can maximize the opportunity.
Right.
We don't need to, who would have thought, I would have never thought we'd be building one, being an $8 property project, much less two. The Virginia ones is awesome. I'm just so excited. But I grew up on a peanut farm in Virginia that we're going to provide fertilizer as one of the products there and a lower carbon version of it. I couldn't have imagined it. So I'm very excited about that. But there's other parts of the country I really can't say, but that has that combination of gas, geology, proximity to market.
Yep. And when it comes to finding these sites, just maybe thinking about the DOE here, a lot of the work that they've done over the years for identifying, qualifying geologic storage areas, I assume some of those works have come into play. The studies that have been done, USGS has done a number of different things as well. 20 years ago, the idea of land having value for a CO2 storage site would evoke some smiles from people that I knew back in the oil and gas industry. And of course, today we have landmen looking for geologic storage capacity and paying numbers that are different than what you would expect from an old oil and gas lease, especially ones that are legacy that have been depleted and they can be reused again for gas storage if you don't do brine. And again, all the ability to find these was done by U.S. DOE's research work. And I have to think that some of the processes that you use to qualify is come out of some of that DOE work. Kind of plugging for the DOE just a little bit here.
I'm with you 100%. And DOE's focus and the market's focus on substantial, larger scale storage facility and geology makes 100% sense. But the market needs projects that are demonstrating the ecosystem. And at the same time, and in parallel with focusing on large storage facilities, we can make hydrogen production, CO2 storage ubiquitous, along with having a lot of major storage facilities, because the bite-sized ones, I mean, 500,000 tons is not tiny, but it's still not 5 million tons a year, et cetera. And I think that's what's going to get a lot of traction in the next 10 years are projects that are standalone, but everything is integrated and they're more modest size of storage so they can demonstrate the business case. And then Katie bar the door, then we'll be finding other, storage formations and much deeper, et cetera. So, but, that's any kind of a transition or a market movement. These kind of things, are universal, what happens. And it's hard for people, passionate about climate concerns and, 2050, we've got it so ingrained that we forget that CO2 emissions are cumulative. So for the next 27 years, these emissions are going to accumulate. It doesn't make any difference what we're doing on 2050 if we haven't done anything for the previous 26 years. So that bodes the question, is a 70% reduction of CO2 today for one product or one industry, is that good enough? And how does that compare to being zero carbon all of a sudden on 2050? And if you do the math, we have to appreciate that it's accumulative in the atmosphere. And okay, we set goals for 2050, but it doesn't make any difference what we're doing on 2050 if we haven't made those 50% reductions and 70% reductions. I mean, in a lot of quarters, even if you're making a 90% reduction in emissions today, it's not good enough. We can't do that. So we're going to wait 27 years to be 100% reduction, or we can be 50% now or 90% now. That's the part of the bubble that's starting to burst. Climate leaders are starting to say, wait a minute. Yes, let's set our goals. And 2050 is a good round number. I mean, who came up with that? It's a good round number. That's why it's there, right? But what are we going to do today and tomorrow and the next day? Can we do 30% tomorrow? Let's do it. Can we do So 90% right now, why would we fight 90% reduction now just because we would like it to be 99 or 100%, but we can't do 100% for another 15, 20 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's part of what the deflation that's coming. Okay, wait a minute. How can this actually work, and what's the cumulative effect?
Part of some earlier conversations were about reductions and adaptation for those reasons, that the momentum in the system of the accumulated CO2 concentrations to date aren't going to dissipate for quite a while. So what's in the system now, we're going to have to live with it until it dissipates on its own. The goal, of course, is not to add more to that between now and 2050, but we have that's also kind of what's been compelling the movement towards the direct air capture efforts underway as well, to create a reduction of what exists, not just prevent what could exist out there. It's
part of the conundrum around this is we live where we live. Our world and our worldview is shaped a lot by where we live. All right. And we extrapolate that worldview. Like I understood working in Romania in 1993, everybody was just trying to feed themselves, you know, and who cared about anything else, but trying to feed ourselves. And so we have in our minds that the rest of the world's kind of like us. They have the same ability to choose like we do.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a few billion people on the planet that don't have consistent electricity 24/7, you know? And so, okay, so the reason that's important is because emissions, just like we can't extrapolate the rest of the world is like us, number one. And then number two, we have this mindset that there's some kind of wall that stretches from the border of the US into the stratosphere, and all our emissions are in that border.
Those are ours.
What everybody else does, if we just do our part, right, it's going to affect the rest of the world's emissions. And I was with some coal guys the other day, last week in Virginia, that are helping on this transition project. Right. And they said, I was shocked. They said that this year, the largest volume of coal in human history will be dug out of the ground and burned. In human history, the largest volume. Okay. So when you do the numbers and realize the emissions doesn't stop at the borders, right? Then what this is going to cause us to do, and see, I'm all in on, I mean, I was at 2:00 this morning working on energy transition. All right. I'm all in on energy transition. And I'm all in on energy avoidance of emission. But we've got to say the other A word. It's not a dirty word. And in the 2030s, it's going to be the byword. And that is adaptation.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you say adaptation today, you're a climate denier, la, la, la. I'm all in for avoidance. But the infrastructure funds in the 2030s and the governments in the 2030s, they're going to be looking for adaptation, where to put money.
Yeah, I got a taste of that indirectly in a meeting in DC half dozen years ago, and U.S. Corps of Engineers was part of it. And we were, probably 10 years ago, and we were talking about the idea of adaptation is something we're going to have to work with that. It's not a maybe if. We are going to have to adapt as the system. The volume of CO2 in the system is going to take some time to dissipate out, no matter how much we reduce it today. And so somebody asked the Corps Engineers what they're going to do adaptation, and they said, without missing a beat, well, we've been doing adaptation since 1920s.
Right.
That's why we raise bridges and put in levees. And so everything's always in a state of constant flux. We've accelerated that. So it's a lot going on. Fascinating times.
It's an exciting time. I mean, I was with a politician last year, and after doing a presentation, and she said, "You mean there's hope?"
Yeah.
Because we're in bad shape when we don't have hope. You know, I've had times in my life not having hope, and you can't even get off the couch kind of situation. But when you have hope and you're a human being, there's this creative unction in you that you can figure out a way, or you get with some folks that you can figure out a way, attach your wagon to them. But innovation is the solution, and there's going to be some very innovative adaptation that's going to happen over the next 27 years also.
Yeah, I would say, my time around watching just what's going on with Congress and the way it funds agencies like the DOE and others to manage the labs, to do the research work, having been around that, one of the things you begin to appreciate that processes, new designs, new technologies that begin to make sense. It takes a little bit of time to get it from the lab out to where it's commercially viable. That is the stuff that makes sense to take commercial. So you have an aspiration window, but you also have the reality of getting things out the door. So one of the things that DOE's done a lot of in the last few years is get behind the larger projects with funding programs to stimulate these. That's, I think, that Office of Large Scale Demonstrations is a testament to that, so that they've got a vehicle in place to fund some of these larger ones, which I think the hubs comes out of that office.
Right.
And then all the lab work on CO2 management, reductions, conversions, and new technology types. At the end of the day, the areas that you're at, my guess is you'll become a magnet for other local industries to rethink where they might relocate to or build up at. And if you're live and viable, which you're doing in these particular areas, you probably create a draw card for other businesses to want to be in these work areas. You encourage more skilled employees or labor pool. The state probably finds different incentives to help stimulate these regions that you're part of. There was already some of these stimulants out there. You have local clean resources that other industries could use. Have you seen, if you got people coming to you with projects, you see people coming to you and says, hey, we want to get located in an area where you can provide clean hydrogen, for example.
Well, I know historically in the US where there's an ammonia plant is built. So
right,
you take hydrogen to be able to make ammonia. That other industry springs up around it, either that need the hydrogen or ammonia, or
right,
that want to provide some other value add to that. But historically, that's been the case. We haven't to date, well, we've had enhancements to the facility and some options for the facility after the first phase is built and that kind of thing. But I don't know of standalone industries yet. Now, we're working closely with renewable power in the areas that we're in and things like that. And it helps their value proposition, that type of work. But yeah, that's the experience so far. But historically, you're exactly right. It draws other companies and businesses and manufacturers to areas, which is, you have land usually in those areas that'd be available. The great thing about Appalachia, we have a lot of water, and you need water to make hydrogen. And, you can't, be taking water that's going to be needs to be used for agriculture or other uses, so putting hydrogen production. And, I should add that to my list of 4 things about Appalachia, because abundant water is a key one for hydrogen production.
That's becoming even more acute now as some of these regions dig into what, if they are going to go particular routes making hydrogen, what the water budget's going to be.
Yeah, often the places where the best solar asset is where the worst water availability is.
Yep.
Our solar, wind, obviously solar, in Appalachia Northeast, there's plenty of cloudy days, et cetera. It's not as good as some other parts of the country, but water being an asset, that is huge. I'm going to add that to my list, Mike.
There you go. Well, I'm glad we stimulated more thoughts out of the conversation.
Well, I've been asked to consider co-developing a project where water is a problem. And we're looking at right now how we can adjust our processes where we're either making or using less water or making water.
Sure.
So that's all part of, what's any kind of transition like this happens, it's going to be innovation.
Right, Michelle, have just by chance, we've got about 10 minutes left. Wanted to see, it went fast. Wanted to see if there's any questions that you might have pop up or or Alex, you as well at your end. And while we've got Peter here, we can hit him with a couple of good questions.
None on my end.
Okay. Alex?
Nope, I'm not seeing any that have come through.
Okay, but fair enough with that.
Now,
The
I had one thought that
Sure.
a topic we hadn't jumped to yet. You and I kicked it around some, um, but it relates to the what early adopters do and early adapters do. And what we're seeing right now, the early adopters are going, uh-oh, we can't get our project financed.
right,
And
right,
so the adapters are the ones who are kicking in now, and there's some are behind the scenes, but they're the ones whose projects will get financed because they've adapted the conversation to talk, the potential market, maybe some mobility, maybe marine fuel, maybe, and they're adapting that. And you know, it's always axiomatic that the early adopters have the toughest time, and it's the adapters that win.
right,
And thankfully, I think that's where we're at right now. Some of the enthusiasm air is coming out of the balloon, and the adapters are one that are trying to stepping back and trying to figure out, you know, is there a business case to this? I mean, one of DOE's main questions to our application, ARCH2's application, and I understand to others, was who's going to buy the hydrogen?
sure, sure.
And you know, that was their big concern. And there's some work underway to try to, you know, some demand side support. But you know, that will help grease the wheels a little bit. But we've got to find a way to make the products that are affordable.
Right,
And the holy grail is, if you will, is lower carbon and lower cost.
yep,
So that's a basis loaded home run, and you know, that's part of why we're replicating these facilities, because we can control those costs and compete.
that brings us to an interesting point. The Europeans, the EU has set up this carbon border adjustment mechanism that officially started on October 1st. And the first phase, the first 24 months, is that anybody bringing the named goods into the EU has to hit a certain carbon intensity level. Otherwise, there's I don't know what they call it, a fine or a tax, whatever they want to call it, but there's a surcharge if you don't hit their carbon goals they're looking for. They don't do that yet, but they are requiring and requesting the data to back up and support whatever you might claim or to show what your footprint might look like. Come 2026, it's real. The rubber hits the road, and so there's a lot of goods and services that originate in the United States that go to the EU that are going to be impacted by the CBA, by this carbon border adjustment mechanism. I could see where what you do and the output that you have is going to help businesses that supply the EU with materials a place to come set and manufacture at.
That's a great point about Appalachia in general. Again, is if it's a value add,
Yeah,
capture the CO2 and store it. And it's not just because you've got a passion about climate change. You can't keep the business going on passion. It's got to, the numbers have to work. But if there's a value proposition, I think it's going to stimulate a humongous trade war because there's so many little corners of this that nobody's thought about. Well, what does that mean if we're taxing this syringe that comes in? Right. And now we got a shortage of syringes. We don't know where to get them from. You know, all that, it's always messy trying to figure out how to do that. I understand why they're trying to protect the collapse of European manufacturing. If you make a higher carbon but lower cost product in another part of the world, how do you not send all your manufacturing into bankruptcy? You know, but it's always tricky when you put those kind of guides on. And, you know, it can be smoothed out, but it's going to be a mess in the beginning, I'm sure.
One other thing that's going on, I've spent a lot of time more in the southwest on issues with CO2 capture and geologic storage, not as much as in the central states into the eastern seaboard area. So in those states, there's a lot of ongoing activity around being able to permit the injection and storage of CO2 in the subsurface. So many of the states already have environmental agencies at a state level to do this. You know, Texas would stand up, Louisiana would stand up. They're working through their Class 6 permitting and primacy, but traditionally Pennsylvania has not had an environmental agency to do this type of work. you have to rely on the federal agency, I believe, for going for your permits.
So we're in Region 3,
Yep.
and they've been getting ready for a long time for the first Appalachia permit. However, with the Governor Shapiro, who's been in office a little bit more than a year,
Right.
He's mandated we move toward primacy in Pennsylvania. And from my opinion, he has been terrific in trying to, middle road is not the proper term, but try to find a solution that works, because it's got to be a way we can, not destroy one industry so we can, while we're trying to build another industry where there could be a transition. And I think his agreement with CNX that was signed a few days ago is an example of that, of transparent by CNX, the production at this well, emissions being jointly monitored, et cetera, the data available. That's the future. Great to hear that from both House and Senate and PA, there's a lot of bipartisan work going on in that area.
Hey, while we're talking, we have a question came up from Ryan Baker. Perry, were your plans to use an air separation unit? And if so, are there any plans? Oh, where'd he go? Any plans to generate electricity via only combustion and then either store the high purity CO2 or use it in a carbon capture utilization product? I think you kind of touched on that early on about if CO2 is captured, where it could be used or stored, but about the ASU.
Yeah, we definitely, ATR requires air separation unit. And so we definitely have an ASU. We haven't looked seriously at on-site storage, either at the geology or from a business case. To date, it's minimal surface storage, and the products are taken away quickly just from a logistics side. But I'm quite certain it's going to be looked at in the future. There's a couple of innovative companies we've talked to that have ways that you can store, substantial volumes. And it doesn't matter the geology, in some tank systems and configurations. But in our case, we haven't gotten to that point where we look really seriously at it. We don't need it in the business case today.
Sure. We're at 3:28 going on 3:29. I'm going to do this. If there's one last comment you'd like to make to close us off, you've got the floor. And when you're done, we will that aha comment or remember this.
I think I've said this every time I have the opportunity to speak somewhere. And thanks. I love you, Mike. We could talk for 2 days without kind of prompting. We'll do it again. Yeah. Appreciate you having. Sure, hope it's been valuable to the listeners. I think that one of the things I began saying a couple of years ago was relax. You're not going to miss the energy transition. And it's better if you're not hustling headlong and trying to get out there in the beginning and adopt beginning early. It's better to kind of watch and see it unfold. It's going to be decades long. And there's a lot of different ways that get involved and angles that is going to happen, et cetera, and twists and turns are going to happen. Relax. And I'm not saying relax. I'm not saying relax on your ambition and concern about climate. I'm just saying that transition takes a long time. It takes a long time to build one facility like we're building, and there needs to be hundreds, maybe thousands in the U.S. built.
Yep. We'll leave it on that note. We'll leave that note of encouragement from you, and look forward to having you back. Maybe, as the projects you got more movement, maybe some new ones to announce, kind of get your update. I'm very keen to watch you as this grows out. And so with that, thank you very, very much for taking your time. I know you're very busy, and so it's hard to get people to talk from the position you're in because they're so busy getting this stuff put together. So with that, thank you, Perry, very, very much. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Michelle.
Sure. Well, again, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Perry, for joining us today. An arousing conversation, and the recording will be available most likely some form of tomorrow morning. If you have any other questions, feel free to shoot them my way, and I'll get them answered for you. Either send them over to Mike or to Perry, and we'll get them answered. So thank you again for joining us today, especially live. And a little shout out to our next Fireside Chat webinar. That'll be on November 14th. That'll be at 2 p.m. featuring Virginia Castro. She'll be giving us a USDOE Office of Manufacturing and Energy Supply Chains 101. Be sure to join us.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Perry. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care.